They say the oldest hunger in the world is not for flesh, but for remembrance. That the truest ghosts are not the dead who cry out, but the land that never forgot the salt of their tears. Some ground doesn't just hold bones. It listens to them. It learns their prayers, their agonies. And when the stars are right, it offers them back. This is not a story of a ghost. This is a story of a wound in the soil and the sacrament of forgetting that failed. A story of two brothers who took a shortcut through a memory that was still bleeding. Family, gather close. This is the Dread Codex. And our story begins where the asphalt ends and the dreaming begins. My name is Father Callum Reed. I keep my Bible locked, not to protect the word inside, but to keep the things that have written themselves in the margins from getting out. This is why. Winter 2022. Two brothers, Jude and Jonah Hartley, drove home to the dust-choked nowhere of God's Acre, New South Wales. They'd been in Broken Hill, chasing work that evaporated like mirage water. In their battered Holden ute, a half case of warm beer, and the silent, pressing weight of a debt they couldn't outrun. Jude drove. Jonah stared at his phone, the screen a cold blue ghost light on his face. "Mum's worse," he said, voice flat. "The nurse said if we're not back by morning." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. The shortest way home was the Bellbird Pass, a gutted, single-lane track through the carcass of the Peru floodplain. Locals called it the Pastor's Road, not for any man of God, but because the skeletal gums that lined it stood like preachers pointing bony fingers at a silent sky. The proper highway added 3 hours. They had 12. "We take the pass," Jude said. "It wasn't a choice." Jonah didn't argue. Desperation has its own gravity. The first sign was the radio. As the last streetlight of Wilcannia vanished behind them, the rock station melted into static, then reformed. A single, frail, unaccompanied voice. A hymn so old the words were lost to the hiss, but the melody was a dirge. "Abide with me." On a loop. Changing stations only made it clearer. "Atmospheric interference," Jonah whispered. His knuckles were white on the dash. The second sign was the smell. Not the dry red scent of the Outback night, but a damp fungal rot. Wet wool. Turned earth. An opened grave in a wet country. It seeped through the vents. "Roll up your window," Jude ordered. Jonah tried. The handle spun, useless. The window was sealed shut, a crack in the glass weeping a thin, dark resin that wasn't sap. Then the headlights found the figure. A man standing in the dead center of the road, silhouetted against the moonglow. He wore the tattered, knee-length coat and wide-brimmed hat of a 19th century lay preacher. He held no lantern. He did not move. Jude slammed the brakes. The ute slewed to a stop 10 feet short. The man did not flinch. He simply turned his head. In the stark light, his face was not a face. It was smooth, featureless stone, worn by wind and sorrow. Where a mouth should be, a dark crevice wept that same resinous fluid. "Drive around him," Jonah breathed. Jude wrenched the wheel. As they crept past, the stone preacher's head turned, tracking them. The empty sockets of his eyes held them until they rounded the bend. "What the hell was that?" Jonah gasped. "A trick of the light," Jude said. His voice was thin. "A stump." The Ute died 5 minutes later. Not a sputter. A full, silent death. Electronics flickered and went dark. The only sound in the crushing silence, that relentless whispering choir from the dead speakers. "We push," Jude said. "To the crest. Get a roll." As they strained against the dead weight of the Ute, Jude noticed something. Jonah, pushing beside him, was breathing hard, but his breath didn't fog in the winter air. Jude's own breath plumed like smoke. Jonah's was invisible. "Jonah? You all right? You're cold." "Just push, Jude. Don't stop. We can't stop here." Jonah's voice was tense, distant, as if rising from the bottom of a well. They reached the crest. Below them, the pass descended into a bowl of absolute blackness, a void where even moonlight drowned. Climbing back into the cab, Jude felt a new profound cold radiating from Jonah. A dry, mineral cold. Stone in a deep cave. Then Jonah spoke, lips too close to Jude's ear, voice a wet, grating whisper. "Jude, he's behind us." Jude's eyes shot to the rear view. There, in the middle of the road, lit by a light with no source, was the stone preacher. And he was not alone. He was performing a baptism. A woman in a soaked pioneer-era dress knelt before him. In his stone hands he held not a Bible, but a large, smooth river stone. He was lowering it toward her head, not to anoint but to drown. The fluid from his face fissure dripped onto her hair, sizzling like acid. Her shoulders shook with silent, hopeless sobs. Around them, standing just beyond the light, dozens of other stone-faced figures. Heads bowed, as if in worship of this terrible rite. A low, rhythmic sound pulsed through the Ute's frame. Thump, thump, thump. Like a giant, slow heartbeat from deep beneath the earth. "He's not saving her," Jonah whispered, his voice now layered with a deeper, gravelly tone. "He's binding her, making her part of the congregation." They all took the shortcut. They all heard the choir. The Ute began to roll forward, downhill, into the black bowl. Jude hadn't released the brake. "The brake's gone," Jude whispered, terror icing his spine. "No," said the thing beside him. Jude finally turned to look. Jonah's face was changing. The skin gray, granular. His eyes shallow pools of dark silt. A thin crack formed from his hairline down his forehead, weeping that same dark resin. He was smiling. A terrible, peaceful smile. "We're being called home, brother. Mum's waiting. We can all be together. In the stillness." Jude's hand found the crucifix around his neck, his mother's gift. He pressed it against Jonah's cheek. A hiss. The smell of burning salt. The thing wearing Jonah shrieked, a sound of grinding rocks. It scrabbled away, clawing at the door. You deny the peace. You choose the road. The passenger door flew open. The thing that was not Jonah tumbled out into the night, rolling into the ditch. The ute jerked to a stop. The headlights flickered once, then blazed back to life. In their beam, at the bottom of the hill, stood the entire congregation. The stone preacher at his pulpit. The baptized woman beside him, her own face smoothing to stone. Hundreds of them lining the road, silent, waiting. And at the preacher's feet, lying pale and still in the red dust, was Jonah. The real Jonah. Eyes open, fixed on the stars. A look of terminal recognition frozen on his face. His throat was marked by a single, massive, gritty handprint, as if dust had been packed into his skin. The preacher raised a stony hand, not in blessing, in invitation. A single resonant click echoed, stone on stone. The congregation took one synchronized step forward. Jude did the only thing left. He prayed. Not a memorized prayer, but a raw, screaming plea from a place deeper than faith. He renounced the road. He renounced the shortcut. He begged for the dawn. The headlights died. In the perfect blackness he heard them, the slow, grinding shuffle of hundreds of stone feet on bitumen, coming closer. Then a new sound, a distant, real sound, the whine of a diesel engine, a miner's truck cresting the far hill, its lights like salvation. When those lights swept over Jude's ute, the road was empty, just dust and lonely trees. Jonah's body was gone. The police found Jude at sunrise, catatonic, clutching his crucifix so tightly the shape was seared into his palm. They found no trace of Jonah, no body, no struggle. I was called to him in the hospital. In his few lucid moments, he told me of the choir, the stone preacher, the baptism of stone. He gave me a name whispered like a curse, Silas Creed, a lay preacher who led a flock into the Outback in the 1880s. They vanished. Their doctrine, Jude said, was not of life everlasting, but of silence eternal. A faith that believed the only pure prayer was one that had finally stopped. Later, a historian showed me a single blurred photograph. A group of men, women, children, standing rigid on a barren plain. Their faces were indistinct, smudged, not by time, but as if the emulsion itself had rejected their features. The caption read, "Creed's flock at peace in the Lord's stone." He would say no more. The photograph, he claimed, had a weight to it that was wrong. Jude joined the seminary, not for solace, but for a weapon. He found none. He lives in a silent order now. He writes letters to his mother, who died not knowing, telling her Jonah is on a long walkabout. He writes them on paper, he then burns, whispering the ashes into the wind. But here is the thing that hollows me. The question with no answer. The dread that makes this more than a story of a lost brother. Was Jonah taken because they took the shortcut? Or was he taken because in that final frozen moment, when Jude pressed the crucifix to that changing face, he hesitated? Was there a fraction of a second where Jude's love was outweighed by his terror, and in that gap, the road claimed what was offered? And what of Jonah's fate? We assume the worst, an eternity of petrified torment. But what if that's the final mercy the road grants? What if the horror is not in the transformation, but in the peace of it? What if Jonah is not screaming in there, but is finally perfectly quiet? And what if that quiet is the most terrifying truth of all? That after the fear, after the struggle, the road doesn't just take you. It convinces you. Last week, I received a parcel. No return address. Inside, a single smooth river stone, cold as a corpse and damp with that familiar resinous fluid. And a photograph. It was the one from the historian's collection, but now, in the front row of those blurred, smudged figures, one face is becoming clearer. Granular. Emerging from the emulsion, like a fossil from rock. The eyes are pits. The mouth is a serene, flat line. It is Jonah. And he is not looking at the camera. He is looking just beside it, at whoever held it. His stone hand is slightly raised. Not in a wave. In a beckon. Scratched into the back of the photograph, as if by a flint, are 3 words. He is content. This is the story of the Pastors Road, New South Wales. It is not a ghost story. It is a seduction. The most profound evil does not always scream. Sometimes it whispers of an end to screaming. It offers not torment, but a cessation so complete it mimics grace. It preaches a gospel where the only heaven is the absence of hell, and the only salvation is in becoming part of the silence. So listen closely, family. If you are ever offered a shortcut through a silence that feels too deep, too old. If the ground beneath you seems not to rest, but to listen. If you hear a hymn on the wind with no singer, and feel the desperate, stony gaze of something that believes it is offering you peace. Turn back. Some roads are not paths through the land, but invitations to stop walking forever. And the most terrifying prayer is not one that goes unanswered, but one that is answered in a language of perfect, final stone. If you have a story that has settled in you, silent and heavy, send it to contact.thedreadcodex@gmail.com. Your truth becomes our tale. Your likes and comments keep these stories alive. Until next time, may your path be lit. May your faith be your own. Good night.